Autumn San Diego greeted me with a familiar coastal fog as I returned from my morning walk. Every day for the past 5 years, I'd left the house at 6 hours and 30 minutes, a habit developed over decades of working as a tax consultant. Now retired, I could afford to sleep in longer, but old habits cling to us tighter than we realize. My name is Reed Holloway. I'm 65 years old, and for the last 5 of those years, I've been living in my son's house. It's not that I wanted to, it's just that after Evelyn, my wife, died, our big house became like a mausoleum. Every room held memories of her. This is where she liked to sit with a book. This is where she always put her favorite orchids. And on this wall, we still have pictures of our wedding trip. I worked as a tax consultant for almost 4 decades, and in that time, I learned how to make rational decisions. Selling a house that had become a crypt of memories was one of those. I pulled up in front of Adrian's house, a two-story California-style structure with a neat lawn and trimmed hibiscus bushes along the driveway. From the outside, it's a perfect picture of family prosperity. Inside, it's a different story. When I moved in 5 years ago, everything seemed logical. Adrian insisted, "Dad, why do you have to live alone? We have plenty of room. Lily will be happy to see Grandpa every day." My granddaughter was 5 at the time, an adorable creature with eyes like Evelyn's and an immediacy that reminded me of my young wife. I agreed, especially since the money from the sale of my house could come in handy for the young family. $480,000 was a decent sum for San Diego, though not a fortune. $300,000 I gave to Adrian. "To expand the house," he said then, "you'll need a separate bathroom and maybe we'll add an office." I put the rest of the money in a separate account and didn't tell anyone about it. It's not that I didn't trust my son, more like a professional habit. Never keep all your eggs in one basket. The first year went great. Lily ran into my room every morning before school. I helped her with her math, and on weekends we went to the park to feed the ducks. Veronica, a slender blonde with a perpetually strained smile, worked at a travel agency and often came back late. Sometimes I cooked dinner for everyone. No big deal, but Evelyn taught me a few dishes that always turned out well. Veronica thanked me, though I noticed her discreetly adding spices to her portion. One day I asked Adrian about plans to expand the house. "We've put it on hold for now," he replied, avoiding my gaze. "It's not a good time to build." A month later, he arrived in a new car, a gleaming SUV that cost at least $70,000. I remained silent. After all, it was already his money. Something had changed between us since then. No, outwardly everything remained polite and correct. For too many years, I had taught my son to respect his elders. But there was tension. Veronica was staying late at work more often, and dinners had become a silent ceremony, with everyone looking at their own plate. I entered the house, trying not to make any noise. There were voices coming from the kitchen. Veronica was on the phone, apparently with a colleague. "Yes, 20% of the deal." "No, the client doesn't know about the additional fees." "Of course, it's standard practice." I coughed, making my presence known. Veronica turned around abruptly, her face frozen for a second, then stretched into an insincere smile. "I'll call you back later," she said quickly into the receiver and put the phone down. "Reed, are you back already? How was the walk?" "It was nice," I replied. "The fog is clearing. It's going to be a nice day." "Great." Her gaze had already slid to the clock on the wall. "I'll be late at the office today, meeting with the new partners. Can you pick Lily up from school?" It was our unspoken arrangement. I picked up my granddaughter 3 times a week, the one duty that still made me necessary in this house. Sure, I nodded. "Does she still have art class today?" "Yeah, until 3. Veronica tossed her car keys into her bag. "Just don't buy her candy after school like last time. She's got a dentist appointment coming up." I held back a sigh. One candy bar had turned into a serious offense. It was typical of Veronica to notice every little thing and turn it into a reason to reprimand me. "Okay," I replied calmly. "Tell Adrian I checked the tax return he asked to see. It's okay, but there are a couple things to discuss." "I will," she said over her shoulder as she left the kitchen. "Oh yes, there's a booklet on the table. Please take a look at it. It might be interesting." I went to the table and saw a glossy prospectus, Sunny Hills, The Golden Years of Your Life, a nursing home. Not the first such booklet in recent weeks. They began to appear in prominent places more and more often. On the coffee table, on the refrigerator, in the bathroom. As I leafed through the pages of pictures of smiling seniors playing chess or practicing yoga, I felt a heaviness building up inside. It wasn't that I didn't see where this was going. Little signs had been appearing for a while. Veronica started accidentally forgetting to call me for dinner when guests came over. My stuff in the bathroom kept getting moved to the most inconvenient shelves. My room became the subject of discussion. Should we make an office for Adrian in here? I tossed the booklet in the trash and made my way to the living room. The house was spacious with large windows and modern furniture. Veronica had done her best, the perfect interior for photos on social media. On the mantelpiece were family photos. Adrian, Veronica, and Lily at the beach, the two of them at Disneyland, at a friend's wedding. None with me in them, though I definitely remembered a few shots of us all together. They disappeared about 3 months ago. A family calendar hung on the wall. September was packed tight. Lily's dance, Adrian's business trip, Veronica's business meetings. My only marker was a doctor's appointment the following Tuesday. It was as if I existed only as a medical problem. I went up to the second floor to my room. It was small, a former guest room turned bedroom. A bed, a closet, a desk, and a chair. On the walls, a few pictures of Evelyn and our travels together. Minimalism not by choice, but by necessity. Most of my stuff had to be sold with the house. I pulled an old shoebox out from under the bed. Inside were the deeds to the house Evelyn and I had bought 40 years ago, a few photos, her wedding ring, and a small notebook of phone numbers. Among them was the number for Oliver Price, my old friend and realtor, who had helped me sell the house 5 years ago. I dialed the number, hoping it hadn't changed. Oliver Price speaking, came a familiar, husky voice. Oliver, it's Reed. Reed Holloway. Reed, it's been a long time. How are you, old boy? Not bad, Oliver. Listen, I need your help. I'm looking for a little bungalow for myself, preferably closer to the ocean. You're thinking of moving away from your son? Oliver didn't sound surprised, just understanding. Yeah, it's time. Haha. I knew it would happen, he sighed. Well, I have a few options. When do you want to see it? The sooner the better, I answered. And Oliver, I'd appreciate it if you'd keep this between us. Of course, Reed. I'll call you tomorrow with the details. I put the phone down and looked at Evelyn's picture. It seemed to me that she was smiling approvingly. The rest of the day went by at its usual pace. I went to the library, picked up a new book on the history of ancient Rome, and then went to meet Lily from the art studio. She came running out, waving a piece of paper. Grandpa! Look what I drew. There were 3 figures in the drawing. A tall, gray-haired one, obviously me. A small one with ponytails, Lily herself. And a middle one with long blonde hair. Evelyn, though my granddaughter knew her only from photographs. It's you, me, and Grandma at the beach, Lily explained. We'd never been there together, but I imagined what it might have been like. I swallowed a lump in my throat. It's beautiful, sweetheart. Grandma would have loved it. Wouldn't she? Lily's eyes shone. Can I hang it in your room? We'll hang it up. As we walked home, Lily talked nonstop about her day, about her new math teacher, about the boy who pulled her pigtails. In those moments, I felt like I had moved in with them for a reason. Veronica's coldness and Adrian's aloofness were worth it. In the evening, Adrian returned from work later than usual, tired and irritated. Veronica had prepared dinner, seafood pasta, her specialty for special occasions. I immediately sensed something was going on. They looked at each other as if rehearsing the conversation they were about to have. How was your day, Dad? Adrian asked, putting on his salad. Calm, I answered. I went to the library and picked up Lily from the studio. Great. Veronica and I wanted to talk to you about something. He paused, then continued, obviously choosing his words. Yes? Yes. You see, we're thinking... He hesitated, and Veronica took the initiative. We think it would be better for you to live in a specialized institution for people your age. Just like that, straightforward and without foreplay. I almost admired her directness. A nursing home? I asked calmly. In an active retirement community, Veronica corrected with a strained smile. Sunny Hills is a beautiful place. It's got a pool, a library, medical staff. And what makes you think I need it? Adrian squirmed in his chair. Dad, you're 65. You're still in great shape, but we're worried about your health. What if something happens when we're at work? Who's going to help? What about my opinion? I asked quietly. Of course your opinion is important, Adrian said quickly, but we're thinking of your welfare. And Lily's, Veronica added. She needs her own room. She's growing up. I looked at my granddaughter, who was silently picking at her pasta with her fork, clearly sensing the tension at the table. Lily has a room, I pointed out. She needs a bigger room, Veronica cut her off, with her own bathroom. She'll be a teenager soon. I leaned back in my chair. And when are you planning on moving me? They exchanged glances. Obviously, my calmness had confused them. They were expecting objections, maybe even a scandal. We've signed up for a field trip to Sunny Hills next Friday, Adrian said. You could come with us, take a look. What if I don't like it? There are other options, Veronica said quickly. But Sunny Hills is the best in the area, and the most expensive, I suppose. Your pension should be enough, Adrian said, not looking me in the eye. And if it isn't, we'll help. I put my fork down. Thank you for your concern. I'll think about your offer. The rest of the dinner passed in awkward silence. Lily felt the tension and tried to lighten the mood with stories about school, but her words fell into the void. After dinner, I helped her with her homework and then went upstairs to my room. Sitting on the bed, I pulled out my old calculator, a habit of a tax consultant who preferred paper and mechanical devices to computers. $180,000 in a secret account plus savings from retirement, about $220,000 in all. Not much, but enough for my plans. I opened my laptop, a 60th birthday present from Adrian that I hardly ever used, and began searching for information on real estate in the coastal areas of San Diego. A small bungalow in Ocean Beach or Pacific Beach. The prices were biting, but with my savings it was possible. The next morning I was out for another early walk. As I passed Mrs. Parker's house, I noticed a for sale sign on the adjacent lot. A small one-story house with a tiny garden. I paused, looking it over. Not that I wanted to stay in this neighborhood, but maybe it was worth a look. Back home, I saw another Sunny Hills booklet on the kitchen table. Next to it was a printout with the rates. $25,000 down payment and $3,000 monthly. My pension wouldn't be enough for that. I realized I was running out of time. Veronica and Adrian had already decided. The next step would be to notify me of the move date as a fait accompli. The phone rang. It was Oliver. Reed, there are a few options for you to look at. When can you do it? Today, I said firmly. The sooner the better. That's determination. Oliver grinned. Okay, I'll pick you up at 2 o'clock. I hung up the phone and looked at my watch. I had a few hours to prepare. I didn't want to act hastily, but now I realized there was no time to think. 5 years ago, I had sold the house full of memories of Evelyn because I couldn't bear the pain any longer. Now I was preparing to leave my son's house because I couldn't stand the indifference. History was repeating itself, but this time I was ready for it. Oliver Price picked me up at 2 o'clock sharp. His old Lexus pulled up in front of the house and I hurried out, hoping to avoid any unnecessary explanations. Luckily, Veronica was at work and Adrian was at some conference. The perfect time for my secret plans. You look more chipper than a lot of my 40-year-old clients, Oliver remarked as I got into the car. In his 70s, he still had a firm handshake and a keen eye, though his gray hair was thinning and his face was wrinkled. It's all relative, I said. Where do we go first? I have 3 options, Oliver pulled onto the main road. The first was Pacific Beach, a small bungalow built in the 90s but recently renovated. The second was in Ocean Beach, smaller but with an ocean view. And the last one is in Sunset Cliff, a little farther from the beach, but a very quiet neighborhood. And the prices. Oliver named the prices, and I mentally compared them to my savings. The second option was the most expensive, but the idea of waking up with a view of the ocean was tempting. However, I decided to see all 3 before making a decision. As we drove, Oliver delicately avoided asking me about the reasons for my decision to move, for which I was grateful. Instead, he talked about the real estate market, his grandchildren, and how the city had changed in recent years. Remember that little Italian restaurant on the corner of Mission Avenue? he asked. They tore it down last year. Now it's just another hipster coffee shop. That's a shame. Evelyn and I used to have dinner there, I said, looking out the window at the houses and trees passing by. Things change, my friend, Oliver sighed. But some things stay the same, like your stubborn desire to do things your way. I grinned. Isn't that what you and I have been doing for the last 40 years? The first house was pleasant but impersonal, a typical California suburban house. Whitewashed walls, a tile roof, a neat little yard. Clean and orderly inside, but nothing special. The second one in Ocean Beach appealed to me much more. Although it was smaller than the first, the location made up for any shortcomings. The terrace overlooked the Pacific Ocean, and it was a 5-minute walk to the beach. How much did you say? 390,000? I asked when we stopped on the terrace. Yeah, but I think we can get it down to 370, Oliver said, watching my reaction. The owners are divorced, and they want to sell quickly and split the money. I wondered, 220,000 in cash, and the rest could be mortgaged. But at my age, banks were reluctant to give out large loans. As if he'd read my mind, Oliver added, I have a friend at Pacific Coast Bank. If you need anything, he can help you with a loan at a reasonable interest rate. I nodded and took another look around the bungalow. A small living room with panoramic windows overlooking the ocean, a compact kitchen, a bedroom, an office, and a bathroom. Everything one person needed, and most importantly, no memories, no ghosts of the past, a clean slate. Let's look at the third option, I suggested, though I'd already made my choice internally. The last house was the most spacious and the cheapest of the three, but located farther from the ocean. Nice neighborhood, quiet neighbors, well-kept garden. But it didn't give me the same feeling I got when I stood on the terrace in Ocean Beach and looked out at the ocean. I'm going with option 2, I said to Oliver as we got back in the car. Do you want to think about it for a couple days? And he suggested. It's a big decision. I don't have a couple days, I said firmly. How long will it take to finalize the deal? If the owners agree to your offer, and if we can work out the financing, I'm thinking 2 to 3 weeks. Good, I nodded. Go ahead. On the way home, Oliver discussed the details of the upcoming deal, and I thought about how Adrian and Veronica would react when they found out about my decision. Would they be relieved? Would they be angry? Or more likely, would they start worrying about my pension no longer coming into their household budget? Oliver dropped me off a block before the house, my precaution to avoid raising unnecessary questions from the neighbors. As I approached the house, I noticed Veronica's car was already in the driveway. She had returned earlier than usual. Once inside, I heard muffled voices from the kitchen. Veronica was on the phone. I wanted to slip upstairs without attracting attention, but she spotted me. Reed, she called out, covering the receiver with her hand. Did you remember we're having dinner with the Mitchells tomorrow? The Mitchells were Veronica and Adrian's friends, a married couple they'd met at some country club. Vaguely familiar faces, on-duty smiles, talk of golf and new restaurants. I had forgotten all about the dinner and, frankly, had no desire to attend. No, I hadn't forgotten, I lied. I'll be ready at 6. 7, Veronica corrected. And please wear that blue jacket we bought for Christmas. It looks good on you. She went back to her phone conversation, and I went upstairs to my room, wondering why she wanted me to be at this dinner at all. Veronica usually preferred me to stay out of the way at their social events. As I entered the room, I noticed something had changed. Nothing specific, just a feeling that someone was here. I looked around and noticed that the picture of Evelyn on the bedside table was at a different angle. The desk drawer wasn't closed all the way. Little things that another person might not have noticed, but I was always attentive to detail. I checked the box of papers hidden under the bed. It was in place, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had touched it too. The unpleasant feeling of disturbed space made me think that I needed to find a more secure place to store my important papers. The next morning at breakfast, Adrian looked tired and irritated. He was silently drinking coffee while looking at something on his phone. Veronica was busy at the stove, defiantly ignoring his mood. Something wrong? I asked, sitting down at the table. Nothing much, Adrian dismissed it. Problems at work. What kind of problems? I poured myself a cup of coffee. One of the clients is threatening a lawsuit. He says that the software we developed for him is not up to par. Is that true? Adrian grumbled. Partly. But the main problem is that he kept changing the specifications during the process. Is this documented? Of course, but he stopped talking and then suddenly asked, Dad, could you lend me some money? Just for a little while. I raised my eyebrows in surprise. How much? 20,000. Adrian avoided looking me in the eye. A month at the most. Veronica, who until then pretended not to listen, turned sharply. Adrian, we agreed. What do you need that kind of money for? I asked, ignoring Veronica's reaction. I need to pay lawyers to settle this dispute with the client. The company will reimburse the expenses, but not immediately. I knew he was lying, maybe not completely, but there was something he wasn't telling me. You have some savings, I said. What happened to them? We invested it, Adrian said reluctantly, in the shares of a startup of a colleague of mine. They've fallen in value, but it's only temporary. I looked at Veronica, who was tapping her fingernails nervously on the tabletop. What about the money I gave you to expand the house? 300,000, if I remember correctly. There was an awkward silence. Adrian and Veronica exchanged quick glances. We used it for other things, Adrian said at last. Some of it went to pay off the mortgage, some to the car, and the rest to Lily's education account. I see. I sipped my coffee, remaining calm. And now you want to borrow another 20,000 from me. It's only for a month, Adrian repeated with a hint of desperation in his voice. I swear I'll pay back every cent. I thought about it. I had the money, but now I needed it for the down payment on the bungalow. Besides, the fact that they had misused my previous money made me reluctant to give them any more. I need to think about it, I finally said. I don't have access to that amount of money right now. Most of my money is invested in long-term deposits. It was a half-truth. The money was there, but in a separate account that I didn't disclose. But Dad, Adrian started. I said I'd think about it, I said firmly, getting up from the table. Now I have to go for a walk. As I left the house, I took a deep breath of the fresh morning air. So that's where my 300,000 went. The car, the mortgage, Lily's education account. None of the things that had been promised. No expansion of the house, no separate office or bathroom. I wasn't naive and had suspected something like that. But to hear it from Adrian, well, it finally convinced me of the correctness of my decision to move. The same day I got a call from Oliver with the good news that the owners of the bungalow had agreed to my offer of 370,000. I had to put down a 10% deposit and sign a preliminary contract. I can come tomorrow, I said. Name the time and place. 10 o'clock in my office, Oliver answered. And Reed, are you sure you don't want to tell your son about your plans? Not yet, I said firmly. All in good time. The next day, I slipped out of the house again under the pretense of a doctor's appointment. Oliver's office was in a small business center near the city center. There I was waiting for the documents to sign and the details for transferring the deposit, $37,000. The rest of the money would have to be paid when the deal was finalized, Oliver explained. I talked to a friend of mine at the bank. He's willing to consider a loan if you need one. Thanks, but I'll be fine on my own, I said. I have enough savings. Oliver raised his eyebrows in surprise. All 233,000? That's impressive. I signed the papers and transferred the deposit from my secret account. I was officially on the path to my new life. That evening was dinner with the Mitchells. Brad and Christine, a couple in their mid-40s. He worked in finance, she worked in interior design. Veronica insisted I wear a blue blazer, which I couldn't stand. Too tight in the shoulders and with some pretentious shine. Dinner was at a restaurant overlooking the bay, one of those fancy restaurants with tiny portions for an exorbitant price. I ate my steak in silence while the others discussed stocks, real estate, and the latest design trends. What did you do before you retired, Mr. Holloway? Christine asked politely at one point. I was a tax consultant, I replied. I helped people optimize their tax payments and avoid problems with the IRS. Oh, that must have been interesting, she said with that special intonation that betrayed a complete lack of interest. Very, I smiled. You'd be surprised how many people don't know how to manage their money properly. I noticed Adrian tense up, probably taking my words as a hint. Dad was always very careful with his finances, he said with a strained smile. A real savings expert. Really? Brad was interested. Do you have any advice on where to invest in the current economic situation? In myself, I answered simply. In my independence and freedom. I don't know of a better investment. There was an awkward silence at the table, which Veronica hastened to break by talking about her summer vacation plans. I didn't participate in the conversation anymore, thinking about how my life would change in the coming weeks. After dinner, as we drove home, Veronica didn't hide her irritation. Did you have to say those weird things about independence? Brad asked about specific investment strategies. I answered what I thought. I shrugged. Of course you did, she snorted. It was always easier to be an eccentric old man than to have a normal conversation. I remained silent, realizing the pointlessness of the argument. After all, it would soon be a thing of the past. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange suspension of disbelief. I continued to live at Adrian and Veronica's house, following the usual rituals: breakfast, a walk, reading, helping Lily with her homework. But internally, I was already pulling away, preparing for the move. Oliver kept me in the loop as the deal went through. Everything was going smoothly, and we planned to close in a week. I was already starting to sort through my stuff, deciding what to take with me and what to keep or throw away. Meanwhile, the tension in the house was building. Veronica became even more irritable, often making remarks about my habits. Do you have to leave your glasses on the coffee table? They have a special place in your room. You left the toilet lid off again. Has that cup been standing there all day? Adrian still avoided talking directly about money, but I noticed his nervous glances when he thought I couldn't see. I'd caught him in my room once. He was supposedly looking for a spare phone charging cable, but I suspected he was trying to find documents about my finances. The only bright spot was Lily. She knew nothing about my planned move to a nursing home or my secret plan to move to a bungalow by the ocean. She just enjoyed her time with Grandpa, telling me about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. Grandpa, did you ever live by the ocean? She asked me one day when we were looking at an atlas together. No, honey, never, I answered. But it's always been a dream of mine. Why didn't you move there? Sometimes life doesn't work out the way we plan, I said. There are other priorities, other responsibilities. But you can still move, right? There was a childlike confidence in her eyes that anything was possible. Yes, I smiled. I think I can. 3 days before the closing date for the bungalow, there was an unpleasant incident. Veronica had thrown a small party for colleagues from her travel agency. Usually on such occasions I stayed in my room, but this time she asked me to come down and be nice to the guests. The evening started out quite tolerably well. I chatted politely with the guests, answered the duty questions about my retired life, my health, and how I was spending my time. That all changed when one of Veronica's co-workers, a middle-aged woman with bright makeup, started talking about how she had sent her mother to a wonderful place for seniors. It wasn't an easy decision, she said, sipping her wine, but in the end, everyone is happy. Mom has made new friends, participates in different activities, and my husband and I can finally travel without worrying about her. That's interesting, Veronica looked at me meaningfully. We're thinking about a similar option for Reed. Oh, that's a wonderful idea. The woman perked up. What kind of place are you considering? Sunny Hills, Veronica said. They say it's a great place. My uncle lives there, exclaimed another guest. He's very happy, but it's not cheap. The price corresponds to the quality, Veronica said. They continued to discuss me as if I were not there, as if I were a piece of furniture that needed to be moved somewhere. I sat in silence, sipping my non-alcoholic punch, thinking about how surprised they'd be when they found out about my plans. Later, when most of the guests had dispersed, Veronica approached me with feigned concern. Don't take offense at the talk about Sunny Hills. Everyone's only thinking about your well-being. Of course, I replied. I don't doubt it for a second. She didn't catch the irony in my voice, or chose to ignore it. Adrian and I are planning a trip up there next weekend. I'd like you to come with us. We'll see, I answered evasively. I might have other plans. Veronica raised her eyebrows in surprise. What plans? You don't go anywhere but the library and the park. Life is full of surprises, I said with a smile. That night, lying in bed, I thought about my upcoming move. The oceanfront bungalow, the new neighbors, the sound of the surf in the morning. This was not just a change of residence, but the beginning of a new phase in my life. A phase where I would make my own decisions without looking at other people's expectations and plans. I remembered Evelyn's words to me shortly before she died. Don't let anyone else decide your life. Not even Adrian, especially Adrian. She always understood our son better than I did. She saw the good in him, but also his weaknesses, his tendency to take the path of least resistance, his inability to stand up to strong personalities like Veronica. The next morning I received a message from Oliver. All the documents were ready. All that was left was to pay the remaining amount and sign the acceptance certificate. We agreed to meet in 2 days at his office. In the evening of the same day, Veronica left on the kitchen table not only another booklet of Sunny Hills, but also a completed questionnaire with my data. Everything was ready for my resettlement. All that was left was for me to sign. I looked at the form, at the line applicant's signature, and felt the determination building up inside. They were planning my life without my input, managing my money, pretending to care about my well-being while thinking only of their own comfort. But I was planning too, quietly, methodically, without attracting attention. And in 2 days, my plan was going to come to fruition. The day was overcast, as if nature had a premonition of a storm brewing in our house. I stood at the window of my room, watching the heavy clouds hanging over San Diego. October in California usually stays warm, but today the wind off the ocean brought a chill and the smell of rain. Behind me on the bed was a folder of paperwork, the signed purchase agreement for the Ocean Beach bungalow, the account statement confirming the transfer, and the keys, which Oliver had handed to me with the words, "Welcome to your new life, old man." I was now the official owner of a small house 2 blocks from the ocean, a long-time dream that only Evelyn knew about. There was a delicate knock on the door. I quickly tucked the folder into my dresser drawer and turned around. "Come in." Lily appeared on the doorstep wearing her favorite yellow starfish dress. "Grandpa, Mommy said it's going to be a special dinner tonight and I have to wear a pretty dress." "It's a very nice dress, sweetheart," I smiled. "It looks great on you." "Are you going to wear something special too?" "Sakin," she asked, coming closer and trustingly taking my hand. I stroked her head. Lily's hair, light and soft, reminded me of Evelyn's. "Sure. How about my gray suit?" The girl's face brightened. "Yes, the one that makes you look like a movie spy." I laughed. My old suit, bought for business meetings with clients, did give me a certain air of mystery. At least that's what Lily always said. "Okay, it's a deal. Now tell me, how was your day at school?" Lily climbed onto the bed and started talking about her new science project, about Jason Williams pulling her pigtails again, and about how her teacher had praised her whale drawing. I listened, nodded, asked questions, but part of my mind was occupied with thoughts of the evening ahead. A special dinner. I guessed what Veronica was up to. After the visit she and Adrian had made to Sunny Hills without me 3 days ago, she'd come back enthusiastic and immediately filled out all the necessary paperwork. I saw them on the table in the living room. Questionnaires, contract, medical forms. Everything was ready for my relocation. All that was left was to get my consent. Or pretend to get it. Grandpa, are you listening to me?" Lily's voice brought me back to reality. "Of course, sweetheart. You were talking about your whale drawing." "No, I already told you about it." She frowned playfully. "I was asking if you'd help me with my report on marine animals next week." "I won't be here next week," I thought, but I said out loud, "I will. We can go to the library and find some good books about sea creatures." Lily brightened up and hugged me. "You're the best grandpa ever." When she left, I pulled my old suit out of the closet and examined it. A little old-fashioned, but still elegant. The suit I wore to sign important contracts, to advise clients, to speak at conferences. A suit that symbolized my old life. The life of a respected professional whose opinion carried weight. I put it on, tied a dark blue tie, and looked at myself in the mirror. Gray hair, neatly slicked back, wrinkles around my eyes and mouth. Signs of years gone by. But I could still see in my eyes the determination that had helped me build my career, raise my son, and cope with the loss of Evelyn. I was ready for what was to come tonight. At 6 o'clock and 30 minutes, as arranged, I went down to the dining room. The table was set with the utmost care. China plates that Veronica usually got only on holidays, crystal glasses, silverware, the inheritance from my mother that I had given them after Evelyn's death. A vase of fresh flowers stood in the center of the table, and scented candles were scattered throughout the room. Veronica was fussing in the kitchen, giving instructions to Adrian, who looked tense and awkward in his new jacket. Lily sat at the table, dangling her feet and examining a pattern on a napkin. "Ah, Dad, you're here already." Adrian spotted me and gave me a strained smile. "You look great." "Thanks," I nodded. "What can I do for you?" "Nothing. We're almost ready." Veronica looked out of the kitchen with a tray in her hands. Her face was carefully made up, her hair was styled, and a pearl necklace, Adrian's 10th wedding anniversary gift, glistened around her neck. "Everyone, sit down at the table. Adrian, open the wine, please." We took our usual places. Adrian at the head of the table, Veronica to his right, Lily next to her mother, and me across from Veronica. This arrangement always seemed symbolic to me. Adrian and Veronica on one side, me on the other, Lily between us but closer to them. Dinner began with avocado and shrimp salad. Veronica had clearly tried to impress. The conversation at first revolved around safe topics: the weather, the city news, Lily's progress at school. I noticed Veronica and Adrian exchanging glances, as if deciding who would start the important conversation. "Lily was telling me about a new science project," I said, breaking another pause. "Something to do with marine animals. I promised to help with the materials." "That's nice of you, Dad," Adrian said, but his voice sounded distant. "Yes, Grandpa promised to take me to the library," Lily confirmed cheerfully. Veronica gave me a quick glance. "Lily, honey, I don't think Grandpa will be able to help you with this project. He'll have other things." "What other things?" Lily furrowed her brow, shifting her gaze from her mother to me. "That's what we wanted to talk about," Adrian interjected, coughing. "We have news." Veronica straightened as if preparing to speak. "Reed, Adrian and I have been thinking a lot about your future, about your comfort and safety. And about how to clear the room," I added mentally, but kept silent as I picked up a piece of shrimp with my fork. "We understand that as you get older, you have special needs," she continued, choosing her words carefully, "and we want you to get the best care and attention." I noticed Lily tense up, realizing the seriousness of the moment, even though she didn't know what she was talking about yet. "We went to Sunny Hills last weekend," Adrian joined in. "It's an amazing place, Dad. It has everything you could need. Medical staff, organized recreation, socializing with people of your generation." "People of my generation?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's an interesting way of putting it. You know what I mean. People with similar life experiences, with common interests." "With one foot in the grave," I finished for him, keeping my tone calm. "Dad!" Adrian looked indignant. "Why are you doing this? We're only thinking of your good." "Of course," I nodded. "And when do you plan to move me?" Veronica, obviously dissatisfied with the way the conversation was developing, decided to take the initiative. "Actually, we've already filled out all the necessary documents. All that's left is your signature. They're ready for you starting Monday." "Monday?" I acted surprised. "So soon?" "The sooner the better." Veronica sipped her wine. "There's a great spot open right now, overlooking the garden. If we delay, it could be taken." "What about my report?" Lily intervened with concern in her voice. "Grandpa promised to help." "Lily, adults are talking," Veronica interrupted her. "You can finish your dinner in your room." "But Mom..." "No buts. Take your plate and go upstairs." Lily looked at me with such sadness that my heart squeezed. I smiled encouragingly at her. "It's okay, sweetie. We'll talk later." When Lily reluctantly left, taking the unfinished salad with her, Veronica returned to the interrupted topic with renewed determination. "So, you're moving in on Monday. We've already arranged transportation. This is your last dinner here, Reed. Starting tomorrow, we'll start packing your things. So that's it. Not even with us, just here. Like I was some piece of furniture that needed to be moved." And the last sentence wasn't a question, it wasn't a suggestion, it was an assertion, as if I had no say in deciding my own fate. I looked at Adrian, waiting for some reaction, some sign that he wasn't completely on board with this plan. But he sat with his eyes down, twirling the stem of his glass in his fingers. My son, the one I had raised, the one I had taught to stand up for himself and protect his loved ones, couldn't even find the strength to look me in the eye. You see, Dad, he finally said, still not looking up. Veronica and I think this is the best solution for everyone. You'll be comfortable among your peers, and you'll finally have a room and get rid of the burden. I finished for him. You're not a burden, Adrian exclaimed, but his voice sounded unconvincing. Stop being so dramatic, Reed, Veronica sighed. We're offering you comfortable accommodation in a prestigious place. Many people would be grateful for such an opportunity. I slowly put my fork and knife on my plate, folded my napkin neatly beside my plate, and stood up from the table. Dad? Adrian finally looked up at me. I didn't answer. Feeling their confused looks on me, I turned around and quietly walked out of the dining room, up the stairs and into my room, closing the door quietly behind me. Emotions raged inside me. Resentment, frustration, anger. But outwardly, I remained calm. Over many years of work as a tax consultant, I learned to hide my feelings, especially in critical situations. And that skill came in handy now more than ever. I went to the dresser, took out a folder with documents and spread them out on the bed. The purchase agreement, the account statement, the keys to the bungalow. Everything was ready for my new beginning, a start that Adrian and Veronica didn't even know I had. They thought they were in charge of my life, planning my future, but I was ahead of them. While they were making plans to send me to Sunny Hills, I was preparing my own plan, a plan that gave me freedom and independence. I opened the closet and pulled out the small suitcase I had secretly bought a week ago. I began to carefully put the essentials into it. A few shirts, pants, sweaters, underwear, toiletries. Only the essentials. The rest could be bought later. I packed Evelyn's photos especially carefully, wrapping them in soft cloth. Then I added a few books I didn't want to leave behind. My old calculator, the talisman of a long career, and a notebook with important phone numbers. Working methodically and quietly, I could hear Veronica and Adrian downstairs talking in high-pitched tones. Apparently, my leaving the table had caused an argument. I didn't try to make out the words, it didn't matter. 20 minutes later, there was a quiet knock at my door. Dad? Adrian's voice sounded uncertain. Can I come in? The door's unlocked, I answered, quickly closing my suitcase and sliding it under the bed. Adrian walked in, looking embarrassed and guilty. Dad, I wanted to apologize. Veronica was too direct. We didn't mean to make you feel unwelcome. But that's exactly what you meant, isn't it? I asked calmly, looking him straight in the eye. He looked away and the gesture said more than any words could. We were thinking of your well-being. Please, Adrian. I raised my hand, stopping him. Don't insult my intelligence. You were thinking of your comfort, about how to clear the room, about getting rid of the financial burden. That's not fair. Unfair? I felt anger rising inside, but I held it back. I gave you $300,000 from the sale of my house, money that was supposed to be used to expand that house so I could live comfortably. Instead, you bought a new car, paid off the mortgage, and God knows what else. And now you want to send me to a nursing home, making me pay for it with my pension. Adrian turned pale. We were going to help with the payment. Of course, I smiled without a shadow of mirth. After spending my money, that's very generous of you. Dad, I didn't know you were taking it that way. He sank to the edge of the bed, shoulders slumped. I just wanted everyone to be happy. Everyone or just Veronica? Adrian flinched as if I'd punched him. That's not fair. She cares about her family, about Lily, but not me. I'm not part of the family, am I? I'm a problem to be solved. He didn't answer, and his silence was more eloquent than any objection. Adrian, I softened my tone. I'm not angry with you. I'm disappointed. I raised you differently. I taught you to respect your elders, to take care of your family, to keep your word. I know, Dad. He looked genuinely unhappy. I try to do the right thing, but sometimes it's so hard. Life is hard, son, but that's no excuse for forgetting your values. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I could see the inner struggle on Adrian's face. Part of him knew I was right, but the other part didn't want to or couldn't resist Veronica's will. "What are you going to do?" he finally asked. "Don't worry about that," I replied. "I have a plan." "What plan?" "You're not thinking about—" He stammered, clearly hesitant to say the word suicide. I laughed, genuinely surprised at this turn of thought. "God, no. Adrian, what do you take me for? What I'm saying is that I have a plan for the future, a plan that doesn't include Sunny Hills. But you don't have money." I shook my head. "You don't know your father that well? I've spent my life teaching others to be careful with their finances. Do you think I haven't followed my own advice?" His eyes widened. "You have savings, but you said you gave us all the money from the sale of the house." "I gave you most of it," I clarified. "Not all of it. I've always been careful with money, Adrian. Always had a backup plan." He looked stunned, as if he'd seen me in a new light. "What are you going to do?" "Riona, that's not your concern anymore." I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "Tell Veronica I won't sign the paperwork for Sunny Hills, and that I'm not going there on Monday." "But Dad—" "That's enough, Adrian. I'm tired, and I need to think." He rose hesitantly, clearly wanting to say something else, but unable to find the words. "Yeah, I'll talk to Veronica. Do as you see fit." I turned back to the window, indicating that the audience was over. When the door closed behind him, I took a deep breath and looked up at the night sky. The stars were barely visible because of the city lights, but I knew they would be brighter in Ocean Beach, where my new bungalow was located. The air is cleaner there, closer to the ocean, and the sky is darker. I retrieved my suitcase from under the bed again and continued packing. Now that the decision was finalized, I felt a strange calmness. It was as if the weight that had been weighing on me all these years was beginning to recede. There was another knock at the door, this time very quietly. I slid my suitcase in quickly and said, "Come in." It was Lily in her unicorn pajamas with a soft dolphin toy in her hands. "Grandpa, are you upset?" I smiled and held out my arms to her. "Come here, sunshine." She ran up and hugged me, pressing her face into my stomach. "Are you really going to leave? Mommy said you're going to live in a special home for old people." "I have other plans," I said softly, stroking her head. "But yes, I won't be living here anymore." "But what about our report on marine animals? And our Sunday walks to the park? And your bedtime stories?" I felt a lump come up in my throat. Lily was the only person in this house who genuinely wanted me around, who saw me not as a burden, but as a grandfather, a friend, a storyteller. "We'll figure something out," I promised. "I will never stop being your grandfather, no matter where I live." "Promise?" "I promise," I kissed the top of her head. "Now it's time for you to go to sleep. Tomorrow will be another day." When Lily left, I sat on the bed, feeling tired but also determined. Tomorrow I would leave this house, leaving the people who saw me only as a problem, a financial burden, an inconvenience. I will start a new life, a life on my own terms. I looked at the picture of Evelyn on the bedside table. "You were right, darling. You always are." I thought she smiled at me from the picture, approving of my decision. A decision that had been finalized tonight when Veronica had said, "It's your last dinner here, Reed." She was right, though not in the way I thought. It was indeed my last dinner at their house. But I wasn't going to Sunny Hills. I was going to my own bungalow by the ocean, not as a defeated man, but as a man who had taken his fate into his own hands. I checked the contents of my suitcase one more time, making sure I hadn't forgotten anything important, then slid it under the bed. Tomorrow I'll leave early in the morning, while everyone's still asleep. I'll leave a note, a brief, unemotional note. They'll know about my decision when it's too late to change anything. With that thought, I went to bed, feeling peace and confidence in the future for the first time in a long time. I woke up long before dawn. The pale light of the street lamps was barely shining through the curtains, and the house was deeply silent. The clock read 5 in the morning, the perfect time to leave unnoticed. Adrian and Veronica usually didn't wake up until 7, and Lily even later, especially on Saturday. I quietly got out of bed and listened. There was no sound, only the steady ticking of the wall clock and the distant rumble of cars passing on the highway. Pulling my suitcase out from under the bed, I checked its contents once more. Clothes, documents, pictures of Evelyn, a few books, personal belongings, everything I needed to start a new life. After I washed and dressed, I took one last look around the room that had been my haven for the past 5 years. Despite all the unpleasantness of the past few months, I felt no bitterness, only a strange relief and anticipation of change. On the desk, I'd left two sealed envelopes, one for Adrian and Veronica and one for Lily, which she was to receive when she was old enough to understand the situation. The first envelope contained a short letter explaining my decision and the address of my new home. I didn't want to completely cut ties with my son, no matter how disappointing his behavior was. Taking my suitcase, I tiptoed down the stairs, careful to avoid any creaking steps that might give me away. In the hallway, I put on my coat, grabbed my umbrella, the morning promised to be rainy, and cautiously opened the front door. The cool pre-dawn air touched my face, bringing the smell of wet earth and approaching rain. The cab I'd ordered the day before was already waiting outside with its lights off, just as I'd requested. The driver, an elderly man with a gray mustache, helped me load my suitcase and quietly asked, "Where are we going, sir?" "Ocean Beach," I replied, giving him the exact address of my new bungalow. He nodded and drove off without turning on the radio, either out of respect for the early hour or sensing my mood. We drove through the deserted streets of San Diego, and I watched the city slowly waking up. Bakeries opening, janitors sweeping the sidewalks, the first buses starting their routes. "Moving?" the driver asked, breaking the silence. "Yes," I answered. "Starting a new chapter of life." "It's never too late," he said philosophically. "My wife at 68 decided to learn to play the piano. Now she can't stop." I smiled. "That sounds inspiring." "You see?" He winked at me in the rearview mirror. "There's always time for new beginnings." By 6 hours and 30 minutes, we reached Ocean Beach. The driver pulled up in front of a small white bungalow with a tile roof and a neat front garden. My new home. I paid the cabbie, adding a generous tip, and stepped out into the drizzling rain. I kept the key to the front door separate, and it was in my pocket. Opening the door, I entered my new home for the first time as its rightful owner. It was quiet and empty inside. The furniture had to be bought, but the basic equipment was already there. A refrigerator, a stove, a bed, a table, and a few chairs, which were included in the price of the house. I walked around the bungalow, opening the windows to let in fresh air despite the rain. The living room with large windows facing the street, the bedroom with a built-in closet, the small but functional kitchen, the bathroom. It was exactly as I'd seen it during my tour with Oliver. But now it was my home, my personal space, where no one looked at me as a burden. Unpacking my suitcase, I put Evelyn's picture on the bedside table, the only decoration in the still empty bedroom. Then I pulled out my cell phone and dialed Oliver's number. Despite the early hour, he answered almost immediately. "Reed, are you there yet?" "Yeah, I just got here," I answered. "Everything looks great." "Glad to hear it. How did it go?" "Well, you know. I left early this morning, left a letter. Didn't want scenes and drama." "I understand." Oliver sounded sympathetic. "Do you need help getting settled in?" "My wife knows a great furniture store with same-day delivery." "That would be helpful," I agreed. "And Oliver, thanks for everything." "You're welcome, old sport. That's what friends are for." After talking to Oliver, I decided to explore the neighborhood. The rain had almost stopped, leaving it fresh and clean. I locked up the house and went for a walk around the neighborhood. Ocean Beach was exactly as I'd hoped it would be. Quiet, with neat houses and manicured gardens, imbued with the atmosphere of a coastal town. Just 2 blocks from my bungalow was the beach, a wide stretch of golden sand where, even on this overcast morning, people with dogs and joggers strolled. I reached the boardwalk and stopped, looking out at the ocean. The waves lapped against the shore with a measured sound that had a calming effect. Evelyn had always dreamed of living by the sea. "Someday, when Adrian grows up and gets on his feet, we'll buy a house by the ocean," she said. We didn't get to realize that dream together, but now I had done it for both of us. On the way back, I walked into a small cafe, drawn by the smell of fresh baked goods. It was warm and cozy inside, with a few tables already occupied by locals. "Good morning," the young woman behind the counter said with a friendly smile. "Can I get you anything?" "Coffee, please, and maybe some pastries." "Croissants only from the oven." She pointed to the glass display case where golden bagels were lying. "Almond or chocolate?" Almond, please. I sat at a table by the window and watched the people passing by, drinking a great coffee and enjoying a warm croissant. The atmosphere was different from Adrian and Veronica's house, more relaxed, more welcoming, as if the air itself was saturated with goodwill. By 9 o'clock, I returned to the bungalow and found that my phone had 7 missed calls, all from Adrian. So they had already found my letter. I didn't call back. I had a new house to set up, and explanations could wait. Following Oliver's advice, I visited a furniture store where I picked out the essentials: a sofa for the living room, bookshelves, a dining table and chairs, and a couple of lamps. The salesman, hearing of my situation, promised to arrange delivery by the evening, for an extra fee, of course, but I was willing to pay for the convenience. I then headed to the supermarket to buy groceries and essentials. As I filled the cart, I felt the strange pleasure of making my own choices, without looking at Veronica's preferences, without her comments about me taking the wrong brand or too much of something. When I returned to the bungalow with the grocery bags, Adrian's car, the SUV I had bought with my money, was in the driveway. His son was pacing nervously beside the car, and Veronica was sitting inside with a clearly disgruntled expression on her face. When Adrian saw me, he rushed toward me. "Daddy, where have you been?" "We've been looking for you." "I went grocery shopping," I replied calmly, nodding at the bags in my hands. "How did you find me?" "There was an address in your letter." Adrian looked confused and bewildered. "Dad, what does all this mean? Why did you leave without saying a word?" "Wait, I left a letter," I reminded him. "Quite detailed." "Yes, but—" he stammered, obviously not knowing how to express his confusion. At that moment, Veronica got out of the car. Her face was a mixture of anger and anxiety. "Reed, is this some kind of ridiculous joke? You bought a house without consulting us?" "I don't need advice to decide where and how to live," I replied calmly. "I'm an adult capable of making my own decisions." "But Sunny Hills, we've already organized everything. Put down a deposit," she exclaimed. "How could you do this?" "The same way you could plan my life without my input," I parried. "Let's not make a scene outside. Come inside if you want to talk." I walked past them to the front door, unlocked it, and went inside without looking back. After a few seconds, they followed me in. Adrian with a hesitant look, Veronica with obvious indignation. "Quite minimalist," she said, looking around the nearly empty living room. "The furniture will be here tonight." I went into the kitchen and started sorting through the groceries. "Do you want coffee?" "No, we want an explanation." Veronica crossed her arms over her chest. "How could you just leave without even saying goodbye? What will Lily think?" "I left a letter for her," I reminded her, "and I'm not disappearing from her life. It's just that we'll be meeting on my turf from now on." Adrian sat down on one of the 2 chairs by the kitchen table. "Dad, I don't understand. Where did you get the money to buy a house? And why now?" I finished putting the groceries in the refrigerator and turned to them. "I had savings that you didn't know about. And I decided to leave now because you were planning to send me to Sunny Hills against my will." "Not against your will," Adrian protested. "We wanted you to agree." "After everything had already been decided and organized," I finished for him. "After you had already paid the deposit and filled out the paperwork. It's not a request for consent, Adrian. It's a notification of a decision." Veronica sighed impatiently. "Okay, maybe we rushed the paperwork, but you could have said you didn't want to move there instead of making this whole spectacle." "I did. Last night when I got up and left the table. That was a pretty clear signal, wasn't it?" "It was hysterical." Veronica brushed it off. "Veronica!" Adrian pulled her back. I looked at my sister-in-law calmly. "You know what the difference between us is? I never thought you were stupid. You always underestimated me. You thought I was too old and helpless to make my own decisions. That I didn't notice the way you and Adrian whisper behind my back, the way you roll your eyes when I talk, the way you put those nursing home brochures in prominent places." Veronica turned a little pale but quickly pulled herself together. "You're being dramatic. We just wanted what was best for you." "No, you wanted to get rid of a burden," I countered, "and get access to my pension and the rest of my savings." Adrian jumped up from his chair. "Dad, that's not fair. We never—" "Adrian," I raised my hand to stop him. "Don't lie. At least not to yourself. You were counting on my pension to cover part of the cost of Sunny Hills, and the rest you would pay out of the family budget. A budget that included money from the same pension I'd been contributing to the communal pot for all those 5 years. He didn't answer, and his silence was more eloquent than any words. Veronica suddenly changed tactics. Her face took on a pleading expression, her eyes filled with tears. Reed, please, let's talk about this calmly. Perhaps we were too pushy with Sunny Hills, but your sudden departure has put us in a very difficult position. In what way? We, we had certain financial plans, she hesitated, glancing at Adrian. What kind of plans? I crossed my arms over my chest, ready to hear the truth. Adrian sighed heavily. We took out a loan, Dad, a big one, to fix up the house and pay for Lily's education. And you expected to pay it out of my pension? I guessed. Not only, Veronica answered quickly, but your contribution to the family budget was significant. Without it, we'd have to tighten our belts. Or sell the car, I suggested, looking at Adrian. Yao, the one you bought with the money you used to expand the house. Veronica changed tactics again, this time to pleading, Reed, please forgive us. We were wrong to try to get you to move to Sunny Hills. Let's make it right. You can come home. You'll have complete freedom. This is already my home, I said firmly, putting my arm around the bungalow. And here I do have complete freedom. But what about Lily? She'll miss you. Lily can visit me here, I replied. I'd be happy to see her any time. Veronica moved to the last argument. Tears. They streamed down her cheeks, smearing her mascara. Reed, please. We can't do this without your help. Adrian could lose his job. We have loans, mortgages. I looked at her with some surprise. Did she really think that these crocodile tears could convince me? After everything that had happened? Veronica, I said calmly, you are crying very beautifully, but it won't change my mind. She stopped sobbing as suddenly as she had begun, and fury flashed in her eyes. You selfish old man. You think only of yourself. No, I objected. I think about my dignity and the right to control my own life. You should learn to live within your means and not rely on the money of an old man whom you consider a burden. Adrian, who had been silent until now, suddenly asked, Now what? You'll just cut us out of your life? I shook my head. No, Adrian, I'm just setting boundaries. You'll always be my son, and I'll be happy to see you and Lily, but on my terms and on my turf. What about financial aid? Veronica asked bluntly. That was the real reason for their visit. Not concern for my well-being, not a desire to preserve the family bond, but fear of losing access to my wallet. She won't, I said firmly. You're adults with good incomes. You need to learn to live within your means. Sorry, but you've been helping us all these years, she exclaimed. You can't just stop. I can and I will. I looked her straight in the eye. My pension will now go into my personal account, and I will spend it as I see fit. That's not fair. Veronica was indignant. After all we've done for you, what exactly have you done for me? I asked. A roof over your head? Which, by the way, I paid for with $300,000 from the money I got from the sale of my house? Did you give me attention and care? No, you treated me like an inconvenient piece of furniture that would be tolerated until you had a chance to put it in storage. Veronica opened her mouth to object, but couldn't find the words. Adrian looked completely depressed. I don't think we have anything else to discuss, I said, heading for the front door. Say hi to Lily. Tell her Grandpa will be happy to see her in her new home by the ocean. This isn't over, Reed. Veronica gave me one last look of hurt and anger. You'll regret your decision. The only thing I regret, I said, is not doing it sooner. When they left, I felt strangely relieved, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I was truly free. Free of manipulation, free of guilt, free of having to conform to other people's expectations. I stepped out onto the small terrace behind the bungalow and breathed deeply of the fresh sea air. The rain had stopped, and the sun was breaking through the breaks in the clouds, creating bright patches of light on the wet grass. Somewhere in the distance, the ocean was sounding, a measured, soothing sound that promised new horizons and possibilities. Evelyn, I thought, you'd be pleased. We're finally at the ocean. The phone rang in my pocket. It was Oliver informing me that the furniture delivery was scheduled for 5 o'clock that evening. I had a few more hours to get settled into my new home, to do some shopping, to familiarize myself with the neighborhood. And I intended to make the most of it. After all, there was a whole new life ahead of me, a life on my own terms. The first week in my new bungalow was a pleasant one. The furniture I had ordered had been delivered on time. Simple but solid, just the way I liked it. Nothing flashy or pretentious like the modern design that Veronica called the sofa in their house. My new couch was soft and comfortable. The bookshelves were roomy, and the dining table was spacious. Though for now, I ate alone. The morning of the third day after the move began with a phone call. When I saw Adrian's name on the screen, I felt a fleeting hesitation, but I answered. "Good morning, Adrian." "Dad," my son's voice sounded strained. "We need to have a serious talk. Can I come?" "Alone?" I clarified. "Haha, yes, Veronica's at work." "Okay, come over. I'll be home all day." He arrived an hour later, looking tired and depressed. I invited him into the living room, offered him coffee. He looked around, noting the new furniture and pictures on the walls. "It's cozy," he said. "You settled in quickly." "I had a lot of time to plan," I replied, pouring coffee into cups. "What did you want to talk about?" Adrian took a sip and looked me straight in the eye. "We have serious financial problems, Dad. Loans, mortgages. We were counting on your help, just like before." I sighed. "Adrian, I have already told Veronica that I will no longer support you financially. My pension now goes into my personal account." "But we're used to—" "Exactly," I interrupted him. "You're used to thinking of my money as your own. You're used to relying on my income instead of living within your means. That's not fair." There was a note of resentment in his voice. "We gave you a roof over your head, took care of you." "Really?" I raised an eyebrow. For the past 2 years, Veronica had barely concealed her irritation at the sight of me. "And you didn't say a word in my defense when she announced her plans to put me in a nursing home. Is that what you call caring?" Adrian lowered his eyes. "I was in a difficult position," Veronica insisted. "And you always give in to her, even when you know she's wrong," I said. "Always looking for the path of least resistance. Your mother saw it too." The mention of Evelyn made him wince. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Adrian spoke again, in a more conciliatory tone. "Okay, maybe we were wrong about the nursing home. But I'm asking for your help now, Dad. I'm in serious trouble." "What kind of problems?" I asked. He paused as if gathering his wits. "I took out a loan against the house, a pretty big one. Some of the money went toward repairs, some of it went into Lily's education account, but the bulk of it, yeah, I invested it in my colleague's startup," he confessed. "He convinced me it was a win-win investment, but the company went bankrupt a month ago. The money was gone." I shook my head. Adrian had always been gullible, a trait that had touched me when he was a kid, but which had become increasingly problematic as he'd gotten older. "How much did you lose?" "120,000, he answered, and I whistled involuntarily. Veronica still didn't know the full amount. I told her it was only 50,000. "And now you have no money to pay the loan?" "That's right. The bank has already sent 2 warnings. If I miss another payment, they'll start foreclosure proceedings." I felt a pang of pity. Despite my disappointment in my son, I didn't want to see him on the street, especially with Lily. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Before you decided to invest in a dubious project?" Adrian shrugged his shoulders. "I didn't think it was dubious. Jeremy has been my friend for 15 years. I trusted him." "Apparently not for nothing," I said. "What do you suggest we do now?" "I was hoping—" He hesitated. "I was hoping you could help, temporarily, just so I don't lose the house." I looked at him thoughtfully. "How much do you have to pay monthly?" "3,500, he answered. "Plus the regular mortgage, another 2,700. That's over 6,000 a month," I shook my head. "And that's assuming you bought a new car and Veronica changes her closet every season. No wonder you were counting on my pension." "Dad, please," he sounded desperate. "I'm not asking you to pay everything. I'm just asking you to help me with some of it, at least for a few months until I find a way out." I stood up and walked to the window. I could see a patch of ocean beyond the glass, a blue streak on the horizon. Helping Adrian would mean getting involved in their financial problems again, becoming the ATM Veronica thought I was. On the other hand, it was about the house where Lily lived. I'll think about it, I finally said. But I have conditions. Adrian's face brightened. Anything. First, you have to tell Veronica the truth about how much money you lost. No secrets. But she'll be furious. Nevertheless, it's necessary, I said firmly. Second, you must make a realistic financial plan. Cut costs, perhaps sell that ridiculously expensive car. Adrian nodded reluctantly. Okay, I understand. One last thing, I continued. Lily should be able to visit me regularly, without obstruction from Veronica. Of course, he exclaimed. She misses you enough as it is. She's always asking when she can see you. Then it's a deal. I held out my hand to him. I'll help with part of the loan payment. 6 months, no more. In that time, you should get your finances in order. Adrian shook my hand, a look of relief on his face. Thanks, Dad. I won't let you down this time. We'll see, I replied, not sharing his optimism. Now tell me about Lily. How is she? We talked for about an hour. Adrian talked about Lily's progress at school, about her new interest in astronomy, about how much she missed our trips to the park together. We arranged for him to bring her to my place on Saturday, a full day from morning to night. After he left, I sat down at the computer and scrutinized my finances. Helping Adrian meant adjusting my budget, but I could afford it. After all, I wasn't going to support them forever, just until they got back on their feet. Most importantly, I did it on my terms, not because of manipulation or pressure. I called the bank and arranged for a monthly transfer to Adrian's account. $1,500, enough to cover part of the loan, but not so much that they could continue their former lifestyle. I then wrote him a message confirming our arrangement and reminding him of the terms. That evening of the same day, I received a phone call from Veronica. Her voice was low-key, which is unusual for her. Adrian told me about your conversation, she began without preamble, and about your offer of help. Yeah, she stammered, clearly struggling to find the words. I wanted to thank you. This help is very important to us. Had Adrian told you the whole truth about the lost money? I asked bluntly. The pause was eloquent enough. Yes, she finally answered. 120,000. I was shocked. I understand, I said. I hope you can solve this problem. We've already started, she said with determination. I put the car up for sale and canceled the planned kitchen remodel. That was unexpected. Veronica had always struck me as a person incapable of compromise, especially when it came to her comfort and status. I'm glad you agreed to see Lily again, she continued. She misses you very much. I miss her too, I replied sincerely. I'm looking forward to Saturday. As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange satisfaction. Perhaps my leaving had actually caused them to reevaluate their values, or more likely, the financial crisis had forced them to become more practical. Either way, I no longer felt used. I was now in control of the situation and setting my own boundaries. I spent the next few days setting up my new home and getting to know the neighborhood. Ocean Beach turned out to be exactly the kind of place Evelyn and I had always dreamed of. Quiet, with friendly neighbors, and proximity to the ocean. I went to the beach in the mornings, where I was beginning to recognize the regulars. An elderly couple with a golden retriever, a young woman practicing yoga at dawn, a scowling fisherman who always took the same spot on the pier. We exchanged nods and occasional brief greetings, and these fleeting contacts gradually became part of my new routine. At the cafe where I had breakfast almost every morning, they already knew me by name. The owner, a cheerful, middle-aged woman named Eleanor, always took a moment to have a word with me. How are things settling in, Mr. Holloway? She asked me on Thursday, pouring me a cup of coffee. Do you feel at home yet? Almost, I smiled. And please call me Reed. Only if you call me Ellie, she winked. All my friends call me that, and I see you're becoming a regular customer. My pleasure, Ellie. I raised my cup in a joking toast. By the way, we have a small group of people here on Friday nights. She nodded at a table in the corner. Mostly locals about your age. We play cards, discuss books, just talk. Come if you're interested. I thanked her for the invitation, not promising anything specific. Although the idea of making new acquaintances seemed appealing, A part of me still preferred solitude after years of living in a house where my presence was barely tolerated. On Friday, I decided to stop by the cafe in the evening after all. To my surprise, the evening was surprisingly pleasant. There were 5 people at the table, 3 women and 2 men, all over 50, with different histories and personalities, but united by a relaxed friendliness. "There's the new guy," Ellie exclaimed when she saw me. "Friends, this is Reed, who recently moved into a bungalow on Ocean Avenue." I was introduced to the others. Martha, a former English teacher, a widow with a sharp tongue and an unexpected sense of humor. George, a retired sailor with a terrific store of stories. His wife Helen, always ready to interrupt her husband to factually correct his stories. Dorothea, a quiet woman with an amazing talent for needlework. And Frank, a former lawyer whose sarcastic outlook on life always drew laughter. "A tax consultant?" Frank interjected when I told him about my former profession. "Gosh, I hope you're not going to audit our returns. I'm getting so creative there." "Not unless you're going to offer me legal advice," I parried, and everyone laughed. By the end of the evening, I felt like I was part of the group, like I'd known these people for years. We exchanged phone numbers, and I promised to come back next week. "And bring your granddaughter when you have her," Martha said. "I can teach her to knit if she's interested." I thanked her and promised to think about it, marveling inwardly at how quickly strangers had accepted me into their circle. Unlike my own daughter-in-law, who in 5 years had never gotten used to my presence. Saturday came clear and warm. I woke up early, made breakfast, cleaned the house, and waited impatiently for Lily to arrive. Adrian had promised to have her here by 10 o'clock. At exactly 10 o'clock, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. Looking out the window, I saw Lily jump out of the car without waiting for it to come to a complete stop and run to the front door. I barely had time to open it before she threw herself around my neck. "Grandpa, I missed you so much." I hugged her tightly, feeling a lump come to my throat. It was only now that I fully realized how much I had missed that child. Her laughter, her endless questions, her unconditional love. "I missed you too, sweetheart," I said, pulling back to look at her. "You seem to have grown these past 2 weeks. "A whole centimeter," she said proudly. Mom measured it. Adrian followed, carrying Lily's backpack. "Here are her things for the day. A swimsuit, a towel, a change of clothes, and some homemade cookies she baked especially for you. With chocolate chips, your favorite," Lily added. I invited them in. Adrian clearly hesitated. "Actually, I was thinking of leaving you two alone. I have things to do in town. I can pick her up around 6 o'clock tonight, if that's okay with you." "Sure," I nodded. Lily and I have a lot to do. When Adrian left, I showed my granddaughter the house. She admired every room, especially the view of the ocean from the living room window. "You live right by the sea now," she exclaimed. "Just like in that book we read." "Almost," I smiled. "Do you want to go to the beach?" "Yes," she jumped up and down. "Can we go right now?" We spent the morning at the beach, building sandcastles and collecting seashells. Lily enjoyed running along the water's edge, and I sat on the blanket, watching her and enjoying her carefree attitude. For her, it was just an adventure. Grandpa had moved to a new house by the ocean, and now she could go to the beach whenever she wanted. At lunch, she peppered me with questions. About the bungalow, about the neighbors, about why I had decided to move. I answered carefully, trying not to speak ill of her parents. "Mom said you left because you wanted to live by the ocean," she said, chewing her sandwich thoughtfully. "And Daddy said you left because Mommy hurt you. Is that true?" I paused, searching for the words. "The truth is, I've always wanted to live by the ocean. And now that I'm retired, I've finally realized that dream. But you won't live with us anymore." There was sadness in her voice. "No, sweetheart, but you can come visit me whenever you want, and we'll go to the beach together, to the park, wherever you want to go." She nodded, accepting the explanation, but I could see that she didn't fully understand the situation. To a 10-year-old, family is an indivisible whole, and my leaving was a violation of the natural order of things. After lunch, we tackled her science project, the very report on marine animals that I had promised to help prepare. I pulled out the books I had specially purchased for the occasion, and we spent a few hours studying the wonderful world of the ocean depths. When Adrian came to pick up Lily, She showed him the workings of the project with such enthusiasm that he couldn't help but smile. "It looks like you had a great time," he remarked. "Best day all month," Lily declared. "Grandpa, can I come next Saturday?" "Sure, sweetie," I hugged her. "I'll look forward to it." When they left, the house was unusually quiet. I sat in a chair by the window, looking out at the darkening ocean. The day with Lily had reminded me how important family was, despite all the difficulties and disappointments. Not the financial support, not the shared roof over our heads, but that invisible bond that remains even after fights and hurt feelings. I pulled out my phone and texted Adrian a quick message. "Thank you for bringing Lily. I really cherish the time with her." His reply came almost instantly. "She does too. Already planning what you'll do next time." That simple exchange of messages gave me hope that maybe we could forge a new kind of relationship, not living together, but remaining a family. The following week, I fully immersed myself in settling into my new life. I went to the beach in the mornings, then had breakfast at Ellie's Cafe, and spent the afternoon doing chores, reading, or exploring the neighborhood. Friday evening, I rejoined the company at the cafe where I was greeted like an old friend. On Saturday, Lily arrived and we spent another wonderful day together. This time I introduced her to Martha, who, as promised, began teaching her how to knit. To Lily's surprise and mine, the process was fascinating, and she went home with the beginnings of a scarf and a firm intention to finish it by her next visit. On Sunday, I got a call from Adrian with some unexpected news. "Dad, we sold the car. For good money, with almost no loss of value." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "And now what?" "We bought a used family car, much cheaper. The balance went to pay off part of the loan." Veronica got an extra job. She's going to lead group tours on the weekends." "Really?" I couldn't hide my surprise. Veronica always considered weekends her legitimate vacation time. "Yeah, she's, changed after you left." I could hear the uncertainty in Adrian's voice. "More practical. And we talked a lot about money, about our habits of spending more than we earn." "I'm glad to hear that," I said. "Sounds like you're on the right track." "Thanks to you," he admitted abruptly. "Your departure has been, kind of a wake-up call. We've been relying on your help for too long, instead of standing on our own 2 feet." I didn't know what to say. I never expected to hear such a confession from my son, especially so soon after our separation. "Well," I said, "sometimes we all need a push to change things." "Yes," Adrian agreed. Thank you for continuing to help no matter what. I know you're doing this for Lily." "It's not just for her," I countered. "You're still my son, Adrian. That's not going to change no matter what happens." After the conversation, I sat on the terrace for a long time, thinking about the unexpected consequences of my decision to leave. I'd expected anger, resentment, perhaps even attempts at manipulation, but not this. Not realizing my mistakes and trying to correct them. Perhaps my leaving was really the catalyst for a change that was long overdue. By giving up the role of ATM and silent support, I forced them to face reality and take responsibility for their lives. The only thing I really regretted was the lost time with Lily. 2 weekly visits couldn't replace the daily interactions, those little moments we used to share, eating breakfast together, helping with homework, reading before bed. But on the other hand, our meetings were now special, filled only with joy, without a shadow of the tension that was always present in Adrian and Veronica's home. Martha called in the evening, inviting me to a small picnic they were organizing for the following Sunday. Nothing special, just sitting by the ocean, chatting. Frank promised to grill his famous ribs. I gratefully accepted the invitation, realizing that I had a new circle of people who accepted me for who I was, without prejudice or ulterior motives. As I fell asleep that night, I thought about how strangely life works out sometimes. What seemed like the end, a painful breakup with my family, a forced move, turned out to be the beginning of something new and perhaps better. Not only for me, but also for Adrian and Veronica, who were finally starting to learn independence. 6 months flew by. The April sun was flooding my little garden, where I was proudly growing roses, a new hobby I owed to my neighbor Harold, a true gardening expert. Who would have thought that at 65 plus years old, I would be a regular on gardening forums and wake up at 5 in the morning to check on my seedlings? Life in Ocean Beach turned out to be exactly what Evelyn and I had always dreamed of: quiet, measured, and filled with small joys. My day started at the crack of dawn. I had always been an early bird, and years of retirement hadn't changed that. Morning coffee on the terrace, watching the first rays of sunlight color the ocean in pinkish, gold tones. Then a leisurely stroll along the shore, exchanging greetings with other morning beach regulars. By 8 o'clock, I was usually at Ellie's Cafe, in my opinion, the best breakfast spot in all of San Diego. In 6 months, I went from new visitor to part of the family, as Ellie herself called me. I had my own table by the window and the usual order of scrambled eggs with tomato and cheese, toast, and coffee without sugar, which came as soon as I stepped through the door. "You look especially happy today," Ellie said that April morning, pouring me a second cup of coffee. "Did something good happen?" "My Gloria Day finally bloomed," I proudly announced. "The first bud opened at dawn today." "Oh, your obsession with roses," Ellie rolled her eyes, but there was warmth in her voice. "Who would have thought that the sullen old man who'd first stepped into my cafe 6 months ago would be so sentimental?" "I've never been moody," I countered, just cautious. "And how long were you going to sit in the corner and watch before you joined our Friday night party?" she teased. "If I hadn't invited you then, would you still be a hermit?" Perhaps she was right. After 5 years of living in a house where my presence was barely tolerated, I'd gotten used to keeping to the shadows, trying to be inconspicuous. It took me a while to learn to take up space again, to speak my mind, to just be myself. "Speaking of Friday," Ellie interrupted my musings, "don't forget we're going to Frank's. He promised to show me his vinyl record collection." "How could I forget? You've reminded me of that for the third day in a row." I grinned. "Besides, Martha called yesterday with the same message." "Martha, huh?" Ellie raised an eyebrow meaningfully. "You two have been talking a lot lately." I felt my cheeks blush a little. "We're just friends. We have similar interests: books, classical music." "Sure, sure, sure," Ellie didn't believe me, but she didn't insist. "Well, I have to go to work. I'll see you tomorrow." "The usual," I nodded. After breakfast, I usually did chores or went shopping. Now that I had my own kitchen, I started cooking, remembering the recipes Evelyn had taught me. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I went to the local library where I joined a book club. On Wednesdays, I played chess with George and Frank in the park. But the most important acquisition of the last few months was the Silver Hook Club, as the local fishing enthusiasts, mostly men over 50, jokingly called themselves. Once a week on Saturday, weather permitting, we would take Bill Summers' small boat out to the ocean. I had never fished before, but I quickly grew to love it. Not so much for the catch, which was often modest, but for the opportunity to spend a few hours in the company of men, listening to stories, exchanging jokes, watching the vast horizon. Lily came to visit me every week, usually on Sundays. Those were the days I took special care, forgoing any other plans. We'd go to the beach, to the movies, to the amusement park. Sometimes we just stayed home reading or playing board games. Lily learned to bake cookies from Evelyn's recipe and was proud of each new successful batch. The relationship with Adrian and Veronica gradually stabilized. I continued to help them with their loan payments as promised. 6 months was coming to an end, but I could see that they were really trying to get their finances in order. Veronica had sold most of her designer handbags and shoes. Adrian had found an additional part-time job as a consultant. They were far from financially stable, but they were moving in the right direction. That April morning, after finishing breakfast at Ellie's, I decided to visit the fishing store. I needed to buy a new line for the upcoming Saturday outing. The store was a 20-minute walk from my bungalow, and I was enjoying a stroll through the spring town when the phone rang. "Dad?" Adrian's voice sounded worried. "Is Lily at your place tonight?" "No," I answered, feeling everything inside clench. "Should she be?" She didn't come to school." I could hear the panic in his voice. "I drove her, saw her enter the building, but she didn't show up for second period. The teacher called us." "Did you check with her friends?" I asked, trying to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding like crazy. "Yes, everywhere. No one's seen her." I thought, hoped you might have her. "I'm home now," I said, turning in the opposite direction. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. If she shows up, I'll call you right away." "Thanks, Dad," Adrian's voice trembled. Veronica and I were just going crazy with worry. I practically ran all the way home, ignoring the surprised looks of passers-by. My head was spinning with the worst scenarios: kidnapping, an accident. What could make a 10-year-old girl run away from school? As I approached my bungalow, I noticed a small figure sitting on the porch steps. My heart skipped a beat when I recognized the blonde hair gathered into two ponytails and the pink unicorn backpack. "Lily!" I exclaimed, rushing over to my granddaughter. She looked up, and I saw a crying face with tear-red eyes. "Grandpa!" She sobbed and rushed toward me. I hugged her tightly, feeling her small body trembling. "Sweetheart, everyone is going crazy with worry." "What's wrong? Why did you run away from school?" "I can't live there anymore," she said through her tears. "They fight all the time. All the time. Even at night I can hear them yelling at each other." I stroked her head, trying to calm her down. "Let's go inside and you can tell me everything. In the meantime, I have to call your parents, tell them you're okay." She nodded reluctantly, and we went inside. As Lily settled on the couch, I quickly dialed Adrian's number. "Adrian, I have her." "It's okay, she's safe and sound." "Thank God," he exhaled. "We'll come right away." "Wait," I interrupted him. "Let me talk to her first. Find out what happened. I'll call you back in half an hour, okay?" After a second pause, Adrian agreed. "Okay, but please tell her we were very worried." When I finished talking, I sat down next to Lily, who had already calmed down a little. "So what's going on at home, sweetie? Tell me everything." And she did. She was rambling, jumping from one thing to another, as children do, but the big picture was clear enough. For the past few months, there had been an atmosphere of constant tension at Adrian and Veronica's house. Financial difficulties that I was aware of had escalated into constant quarrels. "Mommy says it's because Daddy lost money," Lily sobbed. "And Daddy yells that she spends too much. They think I can't hear, but I can hear everything." "Of course you do," I sighed, putting my arm around her shoulders. "Kids always hear more than adults think they do." "Yesterday was the worst," Lily continued. "Mom said she'd had enough, that she was going to go to Grandma Carol's and take me with her. And Daddy yelled that he wouldn't let her do that. They were arguing so loudly that the neighbors were banging on the wall." I listened with growing concern. The situation was clearly worse than I had imagined. The financial help I was providing may have postponed the crisis, but it didn't solve the underlying problems in Adrian and Veronica's relationship. "And that's why you decided to run away?" I asked softly. Lily nodded. "I don't want to go away with my mom to Grandma Carol's. It's boring there, and I don't have my friends there, and I won't be allowed to see my dad. And you." "Oh, sweetie," I pulled her close to me. "Grown-ups sometimes say things they don't mean to do, especially when they're angry. I'm sure your mom won't take you away without your dad's permission." "But if they get divorced?" There was real fear in her voice. "Jessica is in my class. Her parents got divorced, and now she only sees her dad twice a month. I don't want that." I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to make false promises or downplay the seriousness of the situation. Instead, I just kept hugging her, letting her know that no matter what happened, I would always be there for her. "You know what?" I finally said. "Let's make hot chocolate, with marshmallows like you like, and then we'll figure out what to do next." In the kitchen, while I warmed the milk and got the chocolate out, Lily sat at the table, chattering her legs and looking out the window at my little garden. "Your roses are blooming," she said. "Yellow like the sun." "Yes, the first bud opened this morning," I smiled, glad that her thoughts were at least briefly distracted from her domestic problems. "Can I take a picture of them?" she asked. "For my botany project." "Sure, and then I might even cut one flower for you to take home." As I watched Lily photograph the roses, I thought about what to do. Obviously, the situation in Adrian's family had reached a critical point. I could increase financial aid, but money clearly wasn't the only problem. Perhaps their marriage to Veronica was truly at an end. When we got back to the house with hot chocolate, I decided it was time to call Adrian. "Lily, I have to let your parents know you're here and okay. They're really worried." "I know," she sighed, "but I don't want to go back there, Grandpa." "Can I stay with you? At least for a few days?" I shook my head gently. "I'm afraid that's not possible, sweetheart. I can't leave you without your parents' permission. It would be wrong." Um, But you're my grandfather, and that's why I have to act responsibly, I explained. Look, I promise I'll talk to your parents. I'll try to help them work things out. But right now, they need to know where you are and that you're okay. She reluctantly agreed, and I dialed Adrian's number. As you might expect, he insisted on coming over immediately to pick up Lily. I asked him to come alone without Veronica. I wanted to talk to him alone first, to get his side of the story. An hour later, Adrian was at my place. When he saw Lily, he rushed over to her, hugging her as tightly as if she had returned from a long journey. "Don't you ever do that again!" His voice trembled with excitement. Mom and I were going crazy with worry. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Lily replied quietly, but without much remorse in her voice. I suggested that Lily go into the bedroom and read the book we had started on her last visit while Adrian and I talked. She reluctantly agreed, casting a wary glance at her father. When we were alone, I asked bluntly, "What's going on at your house? Lily says you and Veronica are fighting all the time, yelling at each other. She's even heard threats of divorce." Adrian sank heavily into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "It's so bad, Dad. We've been trying to get our finances in order, like you advised. We sold the car, cut back on expenses, but the debts are too high. And now my boss was fired and the new boss has brought in his own team. I could be out on the street at any moment. And Veronica? She blames me for everything," he said bitterly. "She says I got my family into debt because of my stupidity and gullibility, that she's tired of living in constant austerity, that her mother was right when she said I couldn't provide for the family." As I listened, my heart ached for my son. Yes, he made mistakes, big mistakes that cost the family financial stability. But at times like this, spouses should support each other, not blame. "And you're really thinking about divorce?" I asked bluntly. Adrian looked up at me with tired eyes. "Veronica has already consulted with a lawyer. She wants full custody of Lily and alimony, which I simply can't pay with my current income. It's a nightmare, Dad." "How about you? What do you want?" He paused, considering the question. "I want things to go back to the way they were. I want us to be a family, but I don't think that's possible. There are too many hurts, too many disappointments. We're not the same people who fell in love 15 years ago." I thought of my marriage to Evelyn, 38 years together, and we too had changed, faced difficulties, sometimes disappointed each other. But there was more to us than our initial crush. Respect, trust, a willingness to compromise. "Adrian," I put my hand on his shoulder, "I can't tell you what to do. Only you and Veronica can decide if your marriage is worth fighting for. But think about Lily. She's scared and confused. She hears your arguments and threats. No matter what you decide, you have to shield her from that tension." "I know," he shook his head, "but how? Veronica and I can't be in the same room without a scandal." "Maybe you should see a family counselor," I suggested. "Not necessarily to save the marriage, but at least to learn how to communicate without hostility, especially in front of Lily." Adrian nodded. "You may be right. I'll suggest that to Veronica. In the meantime," I continued, "I want to suggest something else. Let Lily spend more time at my place, not just on Sundays, but maybe a couple nights a week. That will give you and Veronica a chance to talk without fear of your daughter hearing something traumatic. And Lily will know she has a safe place to go when things are too hard at home." "That's a very generous offer, Dad." Adrian's eyes filled with gratitude. "Are you sure you can handle it? After all, you're already 65, not 95, I grinned. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of a 10-year-old girl. Besides, Lily and I get along just fine." "That's true," he smiled weakly. "She adores you. All the way home from school, she usually tells me what you did over the weekend." "Then it's settled," I stood up. "I'll talk to Lily, explain that she can always come to me if she needs to. But I'll also tell her that running away from school unannounced is not the answer. She must understand that such behavior only adds to her parents' worries." Adrian nodded. "Thank you, Dad, for everything. I don't know what we'd do without you." "The same as everyone else," I replied, "doing the best we could, but I'm glad I could help." When we called Lily, she came out with a wary look on her face, clearly expecting to be punished. Instead, we explained her new plan. She would be spending more time with me, including some weekdays. Her face brightened. Really, I can stay tonight. Adrian and I exchanged glances. Not tonight, sweetheart, I said softly. First, we need to organize everything. To gather your things, your school supplies. But soon, I promise. She was a little sad, but she still agreed to go home with her father, especially when I promised that she could take a rose from my garden with her. After they left, I sat on the terrace, looking out at the ocean and reflecting on the unexpected turn of events. 6 months ago, I was the one who left home, fleeing the toxic atmosphere and neglect. Now it seems I have become a refuge for a granddaughter facing a similar situation. Life is full of irony, but one thing I was sure of was that I would not repeat Adrian and Veronica's mistakes. I would create a safe space for Lily where she would feel loved and protected, no matter what was going on between her parents. Over the next few weeks, our new plan began to work. Lily spent 2 or 3 evenings a week and most weekends at my house. She got her own room in my bungalow, a small guest bedroom that we decorated together with dolphin and starfish posters. My friends from the Friday company took her in like family. Martha taught her to knit, Frank told her funny stories from his law practice, and Ellie always had special chocolate chip cookies for her. Adrian and Veronica, meanwhile, started attending couples therapy. I didn't know if it would save their marriage, but I could already see positive changes as they learned to communicate more calmly, not yelling at the slightest disagreement. Lily noticed the change too and began to worry less. One evening when Lily and I were sitting on the beach watching the sunset, she suddenly asked, "Grandpa, are you happy here, without Daddy and Mommy?" I pondered the question. "Yes, honey, I'm happy. Not because I am without them, but because here I can be myself. Do you understand?" She nodded seriously. "Like I am at your place. At home, I'm always afraid of doing something wrong, lest Mom and Dad start fighting again. And here I'm just, yeah." Her words touched me to the core. That's what I wanted, to create a space for her where she could be herself without fear or tension. "You can always be yourself with me," I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. "And you know what? I think your parents are learning that too. Learning to be themselves and let others be themselves." "And if they do get divorced," she asked quietly, "what then?" "Then we'll get through it together," I said confidently. "No matter what happens, you'll always have both of them in your life. And me too." She clung to me tighter, and we watched in silence as the sun sank into the ocean, coloring the sky in water shades of gold and purple.